UFC Vegas 78 betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's flyweight division, we have UFC newcomer Luana Santos, a minus 155 favorite. The comeback on Juliana Miller is plus 130. And this is a spot where I actually favor the debutant fighter in Santos, who previously fought over an LFA. She's a 5-1 prospect fighting out of Brazil, but she seems to be pretty well-rounded. You know, she's very young, only 23 years old, but we've seen improvements from fight to fight. She's a good striker, has a powerful right hand, solid leg kicks that she'll look to throw repeatedly, but she also comes from a high-level judo background, and we've seen her rely on her wrestling and judo a lot more over her last couple fights, and I think she could have multiple advantages here over Juliana Miller, who honestly is coming off one of the worst performances as a big favorite. Her last time out over Veronica Hardy, who landed 4 takedowns against her. She really didn't have much in terms of the striking either. And even though she's the former Ultimate Fighter winner, you know, she beat Brogdon Walker in the finale, which that's not really doing too much to impress me either. And then following it up with that performance against Hardy, I think Miller needs some massive improvements. I think she's very raw, you know, for somebody that typically leans on their wrestling, their physicality, and being able to just get dominated by Hardy coming off a really long layoff there. It just screams red flag to me. And I think Santos is going to be clearly the better striker on the feet. And I actually think she could be the one to rely on her judo and have success in the wrestling as well. So I like the favorite here in Luana Santos. I think she gets her hand raised. I think it comes by decision though. So in terms of DraftKings, we have a 13 fight slate. This is one that I just don't have a ton of interest on either side. We're going Luana Santos by decision. That's the official pick. And next fight up in the bantamweight division, we have Damon Blackshear coming in. He's likely going to be a favorite here against Jose Johnson, who's stepping in on short notice. This was the Brady Highstand matchup. He pulled out due to a staph infection. So now we have Jose Johnson stepping in. He previously fought on Dana White's Contender Series, actually fought on Contender Series multiple times, but he got the win over Jack Cartwright his last time out in last season in August. And now he's coming in against Damon Blackshear. I think he's going to have a striking advantage, but Blackshear, I think, is going to have a pretty clear grappling advantage. We've seen Jose Johnson get taken down fairly easily, and yes, he's been able to reverse positions against guys that aren't really very positionally sound, but he does get very sloppy, and we've seen him get submitted 3 times in his career. I think Blackshear is clearly a better submission grappler. I think he's pretty solid in terms of keeping position, you know, taking the back, etc. I think if he does that to Johnson, I doubt Johnson's going to be able to force some of those scrambles that he's done so well on the regional scene. I think Blackshear probably finds a finish in the second or third round. We're going Damon Blackshear by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the women's strawweight division, we have Jacqueline Amorim, a minus 250 favorite with Montserrat Ruiz on the comeback at plus 210. And Amorim probably rings a bell because she made her UFC debut, was a big favorite against Sam Hughes a few months back, and she looked good in round 1. She got the fight to the ground, had a deep submission attempt, but Hughes fought through it, credit to her, and Amorim simply did not have the cardio basically past the first round. She gassed out bad. The takedown attempts came much weaker. Hughes was able to stuff them, take over, and get her hand raised. But I'm giving Amorim one more shot here just because I know she's a big favorite again. We have concerns about the cardio. All of her 6 career wins have come inside the first round, so don't expect her to keep a pace outside of the first round. I'm just not sure she's going to need to in this matchup because she's a much better submission grappler, high-level grappler with a black belt. 5 of her 6 wins have come by submission. Very dangerous when the fight hits the ground. And now she's facing somebody in Ruiz who's going to willingly engage in the grappling. You know, she basically is just a one-dimensional scarf hold type of fighter, and I just don't think she's going to be able to do that to Amorim. I think she's going to be mismatched on the mat, and that's where I expect the fight to play out. I think Amorim gets the job done here, bounces back, and gets a first-round submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the heavyweight division, we have Martin Buday, a minus 218 favorite with Josh Parisian on the comeback at plus 180. And this is one that I don't have a ton of interest for DraftKings. I've never been a Martin Buday guy. I actually think he's a fade moving forward, but he's had a couple favorable matchups here. He's getting one of the best matchups he could possibly get against Josh Parisian here. Buday is just like a very thin margins kind of guy. Doesn't throw a ton of volume on the feet. You know, he keeps an okay pace for heavyweight. Doesn't have a ton of power. Does have a handful of knockouts, but he's basically just like a cage push guy, very middling heavyweight, whereas Parisian is bottom of the barrel. You know, he does have some knockout power. Most of his wins have come by knockout, but he consistently fades as fights get extended. He's never been able to defend takedowns, defends them very poorly, can't really work back to his feet either, and I don't trust the durability. He's been finished in 3 of his 6 professional losses. He's just looking for a way out basically anytime the going gets rough here. So I think Bidet by decision is probably the most likely outcome. Wouldn't mind a late TKO in case Parisian just completely quits, which isn't out of the question. But in terms of DraftKings, I just think there's better fights to target. The official pick's going to be Bidet by decision. And next up, we have a really fun matchup in the featherweight division as Francis Marshall comes in as a -165 favorite with Isaac Dolgarian, the UFC newcomer, on the comeback at +140. And this is a matchup where we'll start on the Dolgarian side. You know, he's making his UFC debut. He's 5-0, very green in terms of experience, hasn't faced the best level of competition, but he's buzzed right through them. He has not fought outside of the first couple minutes of the first round in any of his fights. You know, he typically takes his opponents down, gets to a dominant position, and smashes them. He is very powerful, comes from a high-level wrestling background, wrestled Division II at Notre Dame, and was an All-American high school wrestler as well. I think he is going to be the better technical wrestler here against Francis Marshall, who has also relied on his high school wrestling background. I think Dolgarian's just going to be a little bit stronger in those exchanges while the fight is early and he's fresh and has the gas tank. And that's the one concern with Dolgarian is he's never fought outside of the first couple minutes. We don't know what that cardio is going to look like, but we generally know that it usually is not that great when these guys have just one speed. It's fast, everything's powerful early, and they just can't keep that pace over 15 minutes. Whereas on the Marshall side, he's kind of just a cardio bully. He's gonna take over as the fight goes on. He's got excellent cardio. I mentioned the wrestling as well. His striking, not the greatest. He is gonna eat some shots, and we saw him struggle in his last fight against William Gomez where he just couldn't find the range. You know, everything he was throwing was missing Gomez. It was very disappointing performance there, but I think this one, if he's able to survive that early blitz, he's certainly live to take over early. I just lean with Dolgarian just because he is so explosive. He is gonna be so dangerous in that early first round. So I think one way to play this in terms of the betting market, if you just bet Dolgarian round 1 and then also Marshall rounds 2 or round 3, I think you're probably going to profit either way. In terms of DraftKings, I think it's a high-scoring fight regardless of who wins. I'm going to side with Dolgarian, the underdog here, but I'm going to have heavy exposure to this fight and heavy exposure to both sides as well. We're going Dolgarian by TKO as the official pick. And we'll keep that excitement rolling in the next matchup at lightweight as Terrence McKinney comes in as a -275 favorite with Mike Breeden on the comeback at +220. And this is a matchup where Terrence McKinney's making a quick turnaround. We just saw him submitted by Nazim Sedjikov in his last fight just a few weeks ago. So he's right back in here on short notice, but this is kind of a tailor-made matchup for him for a couple reasons. Mike Breeden has never really been good at defending takedowns. He's been taken down multiple times, and I think that's a clear path to victory for Terrence McKinney, especially while he has the cardio to do it. But also, Breeden's been knocked out twice in his career. When you're facing somebody that is so explosive like a Terrence McKinney, who can go to the wrestling, who does have knockout power, I think that early finish is super live for Terrence McKinney, and I think it actually does come here. I think Mike Breeden is reliant on either landing a big bomb himself early or just outlasting the early storm, and I just don't think that he's the type of fighter that's going to be able to do that here. I think McKinney gets it done in round 1. McKinney by TKO is the official pick. And next fight up, we have Marcus McGee, one of the bigger favorites on the card at -400 with JP Buys on the comeback at +300. And Marcus McGee made a statement in his UFC debut. He came in as an underdog, got the finish over Journey Newson, and now he's a huge favorite, but it's another good matchup for him. Of his 7 victories, all of them have come by finish, most of them by knockout, and that's where he's going to have a clear advantage here on the feet. He is going to be the more powerful striker, and JP Buys, we know the issue with him has been the durability. He's 0-3 in the UFC. He's been knocked out in 2 of those losses, been knocked down basically by every punch that lands, it seems. And while he does have, a little bit of wrestling, some submission grappling, that's his path to victory here. But he just hasn't been able to have a ton of success doing that at the UFC level. And against better grapplers, he's lost in that category as well. So I'm just not convinced that that's even going to be a real path for him here against somebody as physical as Marcus McGee. And I just struggle to see his chin hold up in this matchup. I think McGee probably finds the chin here and knocks him out. We're going McGee by knockout. That's the official pick. And next up in the middleweight division, we have my guy Josh Fremd, a minus 340 favorite, another big favorite here with Jamie Pickett on the comeback at plus 270. And Fremd is always going to be a friend of this show after cashing a big underdog ticket against Cedric Dumas his last time out. Absolutely dominated that fight from pillar to post until he got that finish. And I actually think this is almost the same matchup, but Dumas is more dangerous than Jamie Pickett. I think Fremd really wins this fight wherever it goes. I think it's clear he's the better striker. He does have some issues with his defense. He fights with his hands low. He's kind of noodly at times. He is going to eat some shots, but he's going to stay constant with the leg kicks. He's got those nasty knees and elbows in the clinch that I think he could have success with here against Jamie Pickett, who likes to fight in the clinch, even though he's not doing a ton with it. I think Fremd's the better technical wrestler as well, and the better submission grappler. So I just think he wins this fight on the feet. He can win it on the mat as well. And I think he ultimately does break Jamie Pickett over 15 minutes and ends up getting a late finish. Whether it comes by TKO or submission, I'm not quite sure, but I do think he gets his hand raised here. We're going Fremd by late stoppage. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have Tayfon Nchukwu coming in as a minus 145 favorite with AJ Dobson on the comeback at plus 125. And this is one I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because I think it's lined appropriately with Nchukwu as a small favorite here. And I do think he is the rightful favorite for a couple reasons. For starters, he's going to throw more volume on the feet. He generally keeps a pretty solid pace. He's a one-dimensional kickboxer, but he does have solid defense and he does have legitimate knockout power. Where he struggles is when he does get clipped. He's been hurt multiple times now. He's coming off 2 straight knockout losses, and we've seen him actually taken down before as well and kind of exposed in terms of his defensive grappling. Now, on the flip side, AJ Dobson is 0-2 in the UFC. Didn't really think super highly of this guy coming in, and he's been okay in those 2 fights, not really blown out, but he just seems to fight on thin margins. He's primarily a striker as well. Not a ton of knockout power, but he also doesn't throw as much as Nchukwu, so I think he's going to struggle on the feet. I think he'll be competitive. I just don't think you can bank on him to win minutes here. And then he's also shown the ability to mix in takedowns. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that against Nchukwu, and he hasn't really been able to consolidate position against hardly anybody, so I don't think he could do that either. So I just think it's kind of a close competitive decision where I side with the volume and the power of Nchukwu, but I kind of worry about the chin a little bit. So I think minus 145 is probably where it should be. I think Nchukwu decision is the most likely outcome. That's going to be the official pick, but neither guy's really a favorite play for me this week on DraftKings. Next fight up, Jasmine Lucindo, a minus 192 favorite with Pauliana Viana on the comeback at plus 160. And we'll start with Lucindo. She made her debut against Warigi. That fight was an absolute banger. And then she followed it up with a dominant decision victory over Brogdon Walker, who, let's be honest, like I said earlier, I just don't rate her super highly, but I think Lucindo has a lot of tools to where she is a bright prospect in this division. She seems like a very well-rounded fighter, a solid minute winner. And you guys know, if you've been listening to me for a while, I like to bank on the better round winners, not necessarily people that are finish reliant or have to have those big moments or have to fight the perfect way. I just generally like fighters that can win minutes, and I think Lucindo fits that bill, whereas Pauliana Viana is very dangerous. She has some power on the feet. We saw that in her last fight against Jin Yu Frey, who she absolutely slept in the first round, but she also has a very dangerous guard. When she's taken down, yes, she's going to give up minutes and play off her back too much, but she's got a dangerous arm bar, a couple other subs off her back as well. Most of her wins have come by submission. All of her wins across her entire career have come in the first round. So she's kind of one of those very dangerous fighters early, but if you have her figured out, if you can stay safe safe in top position in grappling exchanges, then generally you're gonna win rounds against her and probably beat her over 15 minutes. And I think that's probably what happens here. But in terms of DraftKings, I'm gonna treat Viana as a live underdog with a very high ceiling, because it wouldn't be the craziest thing if she caught Lucindo in a grappling exchange here. Lucindo's still very young. You know, yes, she's got a decent amount of fights, but she was submitted multiple times on the regional scene. I think it wouldn't be the craziest thing if Viana did snatch up an arm here or something like that. So I am going to have a healthy amount of exposure to this fight on DraftKings, really on both sides, because I think it is going to score well. I lean Lucindo by decision, but like I said, I'm probably going to have more exposure to Viana on DraftKings. Next fight up in the light heavyweight division, we have Khalil Roundtree, a minus 205 favorite, with Chris Daukaus on the comeback at plus 170. And this is one where I do kind of like the underdog here in Chris Daukaus for a couple of reasons. For starters, Roundtree is just never somebody that I feel comfortable backing. And yes, he's been a kind of a cash cow over his last couple fights here. He's on a 3-fight win streak. I know a lot of people didn't think he won that Jacoby fight. I didn't think so either. Close fight. He ended up getting the split decision. But regardless, he's on a 3-fight win streak. He's got a ton of knockout victories over the course of his career. 7 of his career wins have come by knockout. So we know he has power, but he is a one-dimensional kickboxer. Never really looks to grapple. Doesn't really defend takedowns well either. So he's a guy who kind of fights on thin margins, like I talked about earlier. And then on the flip side, Chris Daukaus, I just think we're getting a buy low spot for a guy that has faced a murderer's row over his last 3 fights. Yes, he's coming off 3 straight knockout losses. That's a concern. We're not sure if the chin's going to be able to hold up, but he faced Jairzinho Rozenstruik, one of the more powerful kickboxers in the division with clear knockout power, Curtis Blades, a guy who many people thought would have been a heavyweight champion. His durability never checked out, but very, very solid fighter, clear finisher. And then the other one was Derek Lewis, a guy who we just saw win by knockout a couple weeks ago, has the most knockouts in heavyweight history. So just because he got knocked out against those guys, I'm not ready to say that he's complete dust here and has no chance, should be a big underdog against Khalil Roundtree, a guy who has kind of historically been untrustworthy over the course of his career. He just showed up in certain fights and just didn't really let his hands go, didn't do much. Like, I do not trust this guy as a big favorite. I'm going to go with Daukaus here. I think he has more ways to win if he implements the grappling. I know it's not something that he usually does, but I think that might be a path for him here. But I also think on the feet, you know, he throws hard early in fights. He has knockout power. We've seen Roundtree knocked out multiple times in the past. So I'm going with the dog here, taking the shot on Chris Daukaus. I think he's a live underdog on DraftKings. He falls in that Viana range, one of those cheaper underdogs who has a real round 1 finishing path to victory. So we're going Daukaus by early knockout. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event, as Hakeem Dawodu is a minus 230 favorite with Cub Swanson on the comeback at plus 190. And Dawodu has lost 2 of his last 3 fights, but those came against guys that were clearly looking to mix in the grappling, like Movsar Evloev and Julian Erosa, who took him down multiple times as well. And that's really the way that you beat Dawodu, because if you can get him down, you can control him, you can poke holes in his defensive grappling. But I think on the feet, he's going to have a clear advantage here. This is a guy that pushes a high volume pace over 15 minutes, has solid cardio, enough to keep that pace if he needs to for the whole fight. And he's got very fast hands, good footwork, not a ton of power, but he's a guy that's very technically sound and is going to stay in your face and win a lot of those minutes standing. Whereas Cub Swanson is now almost 40 years old. He's coming off a knockout loss where he looked kind of washed in that fight. And it's clear that his best days are behind him, right? So I'm just never in the business of backing these old guys, especially at the smaller divisions. So it's no secret that I think Dawodu is probably the rightful favorite here, but you can't completely rule out Cub Swanson because 2 of his last 3 wins have come by knockout. So it's clear that he still does have some finishing ability, even though he is a lesser version of what he used to be. And I do think he does have the submission grappling advantage here. He just never really goes to it, and I don't think he'll even have much success, even if he does try to implement that, and I don't expect him to. So I think the speed difference is going to be key here in favor of Dawodu. I think the footwork's going to be key. I think Dawodu wins those striking exchanges and gets his hand raised. Dawodu by decision is the official pick. Which brings us to our main event, as Rafael Dos Anjos is a minus 120 small favorite with Vicente Luque on the comeback at plus 100, and even at nearly 39 years old, RDA is still a beast. like, you credit to him. He doesn't look like a guy like Cub Swanson, who it's clear that he's a lesser version. RDA is still very much game. He is still very relevant in this division. And I know he is a little bit undersized at 170, but I think this is a good stylistic matchup for him. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He's a solid boxer on the feet out of the southpaw stance, powerful as well. And we know when he's at his best, he's going to mix in the grappling. He averages over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's got good jiu-jitsu as well, can submit guys. I just think he's super well-rounded. He doesn't seem to be like a washed version of himself quite yet. Whereas Vicente Luque, there's a couple red flags here. For starters, I don't think he's looked particularly great over his last couple fights. He started to look a little bit shop-worn, I thought. And then he's also coming off a knockout loss against Jeff Neal, where he had some sort of brain bleed, brain injury, which he did end up getting cleared for, but it's just kind of a scary situation, especially when we're talking about a guy who has been in so many wars, who has taken a ton of damage. I think on the feet, RDA is the better technical striker. I think he's better defensively, and I think he can take Luque down. Luque's never been great at defending takedowns, and on the feet, he's always kind of been in wars with guys that aren't half the striker that RDA is. So I think RDA is the better striker, going to be winning on the feet, but he also has more of the upside in the grappling as well. I think the line's off here. I think the reason we're getting a favorable price is because RDA is older and 39 years old, etc. But I think it's just wrong here. I think RDA's got to be a rightful favorite. I think he gets his hand raised. We're going RDA by submission as the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. It'll have ownership projections as well. It's all completely free. Check it out. I'll pin it in the comments. As always, best of luck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.